Well, welcome back, everybody. Jeff Hopper, Jeff Cranford.
Good to be back. Nice hat.
Hey.
Walker Cup.
Walker Cup.
Love
LA
it.
Country Club. We are talking about street myths.
Yes.
Things that you hear. And a lot of those you hear around golf.
All the time.
I hear them a lot about two people lately. Earl Woods looking down on Tiger
Yeah.
and being proud of how his son has come back.
Right.
And Arnold Palmer looking down on the golf world, kind of giving his blessing to what's going on.
Yeah.
Is it true? Are they in heaven looking down?
Well, I think the first thing we need to establish if we're going to talk about this is, first of all, I have no idea. And fortunately for me and for all of us, God is the judge. You know, Paul's letter to the Jewish community and his letter to the Hebrews, he said, God is the judge of all. So that's the beautiful thing. Why? Because God has all the information. I have smatterings of information. I have perceptions. I have observations. Now, Jesus said to some degree, you'll know them by their fruits in Matthew chapter 7.
True.
So there's an element in which if you confess me before men, I'll confess you before my Father who's in heaven. So it's not like it's completely undetectable by us, but certainly I have no idea. I wasn't with Mr. Palmer on his deathbed. I don't know what that looked like. I don't know what his life. I know he had some incredible fruit in his life. In fact, he did a video for us with Youth for Christ, one of maybe the last videos he ever produced as an intro to something I was doing for Youth for Christ. So I can't speak to that, but I think there's a general philosophy behind that. We use that language, those speculations about God, without really thinking about it. Now, I'm encouraged, Jeff, that people think by saying that, maybe it's just loosely, but that, well, maybe there is an afterlife and maybe that we're beyond this. So those are good steps in the right direction. But in terms of just saying definitively, just because someone died, that now they're in a better place, well, it's maybe just not biblical to be able to make that statement without really having the facts.
Well, we've all been to two kinds of funerals. The funeral where there's great hope that this
Absolutely.
person's in heaven, and the funeral where there's not much hope.
Yeah.
And you've delivered those kinds of funerals. What's the difference?
Yeah, one of the most frustrating memorials I've ever done was at a country club one time. And it was a memorial. They needed me they said, for a little religion. And it was basically a roast. Everybody was drinking, partying, and they just told, it was a roast. And they told to talk about their drunken parties and about his life and all these different kinds of things. And I never forget looking over at his family, and they were not enjoying this at all.
Yeah.
With the death in their eyes, the pain that was in their eyes. It was a really challenging moment. And I was not able to definitively say in that moment, I know this guy was in a better place. But what I was able to say is that I know we have hope for us to be resurrected because of the resurrection of Jesus. Then I preach the cross. But I'll be honest with you, I hate him, and I really, very rarely, unless the Lord really prompts me, to do a memorial with somebody I don't know, because it's just so challenging. I'd much rather be able to go and say, I have great confidence because based upon this person's confession and the observable life, that they're living in eternity because of what Jesus had done for them and their embracing of Jesus.
So how can I know
Well,
that I'm going to heaven?
yeah, and Jesus made this pretty definitive in John chapter 11. This is the raising of Lazarus. He's about to raise Lazarus from the dead. He waited a few days. Mary and Martha were very discouraged and distraught, and if you'd have been here, our brother wouldn't have died. And then Jesus makes a very definitive declaration. He says, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me shall live even if he dies. So Jesus did give us a sense of he's in a better place as possible.
Sure.
Without any question. But there was a precedent to that, and that was if you believe in me. And of course that's a whole nother topic. What does it mean to believe in Jesus? Believe that he existed, to believe in his messiahship and that he was God in human flesh. And to believe that is to change your life forever.
Quickly, Jesus spoke of another Lazarus in a parable.
He did.
Of a poor Lazarus who went to a better place and a rich man who didn't. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, now this is a little complicated because it talks about Abraham's bosom or paradise and different things like that. Remember, this was a pre-cross event.
Right.
So this was in some way, prior to the cross event, people didn't have access to the direct presence of God. From what we can tell theologically, I think that's an accurate statement to make. Jesus, once he had made atonement, the blood had been poured out on the heavenly mercy seat, if you will. The atonement had been made, then it opened up access. So for instance, Stephen in the book of Acts, when he's being stoned, he looks up, sees Jesus at the right hand of the Father and says, "Receive my spirit," and then the Bible says he fell asleep. So after that, but that was post-cross. Prior to the cross, there was Abraham's bosom, a holding place, if you will, for lack of a better term, for the spirits of the departed righteous. That's paradise. For instance, Jesus on the cross said, "Today you'll be with me in paradise," but we know he didn't go into the presence of the Father, because a few days later he told one of the gals who came to see him, Mary Magdalene, who came to see him at the tomb, said, "Don't cling to me, woman, for I've not yet ascended to the Father." So clearly paradise in that sense was a different place than the presence of God. So better place, yes, definitely, but in the case of Lazarus that you mentioned, different Lazarus in that parable, there was a wealthy man who lived daily in splendor, the Bible says, and he was suffering. He was in a place of torment, and he just, go tell my brothers, and just anything to keep him out of this place. And the response was, well, they have the prophets, let them go look.
Well, and I think what's important about that parable, in light of this conversation,
Yes.
is that it reminds us that this is something of importance. We can't just say everybody's in a better place.
Yeah.
That there is a difference, and we have to learn about that difference.
And we can be so cavalier. The man upstairs, the golf
Right.
gods, all the language that we hear around the club all the time. We have to be cautious. We really don't realize who we're dealing with here.
We don't. Well, we'll see you next time, and we're going to talk about what it means to be sincere in pursuing some of these questions.